right, good morning. So this is our panel on illustrating board games. So I am Jennifer Closson. I'm the creative director for Greater Than Games. And to my right, we've got Adam.
I'm Adam Rebottaro. I am the illustrator for all of the Sentinel Comics line of products and some other things.
And then to my left, we've got Lucas.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Lucas Durham. I've primarily illustrated Spirit Island, and I've done a few things for Dice Hate Me, Fate of the Elder Gods, which we've got a big expansion set coming out, and I've got a bunch of work in there. Yeah.
And then you've also worked with some other companies. Can you tell us about that?
I've worked with primarily Fantasy Flight Games for the last 5 years, working on everything from Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, Star Wars, some of their other licenses. I've worked for Pathfinder and a bunch of other Kickstarter, smaller companies, so all over the place.
So our hope is that we can present to you a few different angles as far as if you have questions about how to interact with art directors or questions about how to get started working with small companies versus working with big companies. We're hoping to have you covered there. So we'll just start with a little bit of background, how we got into the board game industry, how we got started, and things like that, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. Sound good? Okay, cool. Do you want to start, tell us about kind of your background, how you got into illustration, and went from there?
So I started illustrating when I was about 15 years old, and I started taking classes in college and hated all my instructors, and they told me that comics were a viable way to make a living. And I just kept doing it anyway, and then eventually my friend Christopher and I made a game called Sentinels in the Multiverse, and I illustrated that, and then it kind of just took off from there, and I've been nonstop drawing ever since that, as for a living, so that's a little bit unconventional way to get into it.
Start your own company?
Yeah.
When all else fails, just start your own company, that's fine.
Yeah.
And then how did you get started, Lucas?
Well, I grew up in a household of creatives. I'm a fourth generation artist. First one to do it commercially on my dad's side. So was always encouraged. I live near Chicago, so I was able to go. There's plenty of amazing art schools down there. So I went to the American Academy of Art for 4 years, studied abroad in Florence at the Florence Academy of Art for a semester. And then basically I got my start here. I always consider this sort of my professional birthday is Gen Con, because basically graduated from school, did a little bit of internships, and just shopped my portfolio around. And so a couple art directors were like, you know what, we see potential, maybe we'll give you a couple of minor cards and see how you do. And 6 years later, here I am. So yeah.
And I'm a little more unconventional. So my path actually began. I started in art school. I was a graphic design concentration in school, but I also took fine arts. It was fine arts, so that I did sculpture, painting, the whole gamut. And then what I ended up doing was transitioning that into more of a behind-the-scenes role where I was working with factories and working on the production side of things because I could understand how their process worked because I had taken all of those art classes. And then from there, Greater Than Games had an opening and I ended up joining them as a graphic designer and then worked my way up into eventually becoming the creative director there. But again, being able to use that background to understand, like, okay, well, what mediums are you using? How can we make this work for this game? I understand what kind of timelines that takes, things like that. So a little bit of an indirect path into, where I ultimately wanted to be. So if people have questions now, we can start there. Otherwise, we'll just kind of keep talking about getting into the industry or how that works. But if we've got questions, I'm happy to start fielding those now. Anybody yet? No takers yet? Okay. So a couple topics that we kind of want to touch base on. One thing that is very important as you begin working with companies and a good way to ensure that you are taking care of yourself, making sure that you have contracts. So whether you have a contract that you have written out or finding a lawyer, there's lawyer companies online, you can hire a lawyer, different things like that. Make sure that you understand the process of creating a contract and the types of things that are important to you, getting pricing in there, upfront payment versus payment upon completion, different things like that, so that you're protected. And that's one of the things that we really, really try to impart to any artist we work with. We say, do you have a contract? No? Okay, we're gonna write a contract for you. We're happy to walk you through it. And I'm sure Adam and Lucas can both speak to the importance of making sure that you do that when you're ready to actually go as a professional into the field.
Yeah, I've heard too many horror stories of people not reading their contracts or not completely understanding them, and so that is something that we strive for, is to make sure that on our company end that our contract is fair to the artist and protects both sides. But I'm gonna say most people are not like that. Most corporations,
right,
will try to take advantage of artists.
Yeah. And really, as an artist, you do need to understand at least American copyright law, especially when you're starting off. A lot of times you'll be approached by Kickstarters, people that are trying to get their own projects going, and it's really important to understand copyright law so you can actually draft up some kind of contract with them, because they are coming to you not only for your services in drawing, but also with an understanding of the licensing of images, because that's probably where the most conflict I've seen with smaller companies come in, is not an understanding of in America, when you create an image, it is automatically your property. And what people don't understand is, like, when they are hiring you as an illustrator, not only are they hiring you to spend hours laboring over a piece, but they are basically leasing or buying the rights to an image. And that's where the main expenses come out. So if you're looking at a stock photo website, sometimes if you see something for commercial use, you'll see it'll be $200–300, and it's wow, that's a lot for a JPEG. But what you're buying is the rights to use that, and that also applies to your work. So.
Yeah, and so that is something you definitely want to make sure that you work through and clarify. Okay, well, I've done this art. Can I sell it in my booth? If I sell it in my booth, do I just need to put your logo on it? Where does how does that work? Can I promote this before the game's out? Any of those kinds of timelines. So those are the types of things that you want to make sure that you understand up front what the expectations are on both sides. So that, because on the side of the company, we might say, well, we're not ready to release that art. That's spoiler art. We have to keep that hidden. And then all of a sudden you didn't know that, and you put it up on your Twitter or your Instagram or whatever, and now the whole world knows, and they're like, well, there went that product secret.
Yeah.
So making sure that you clarify all those little details. It seems like the not fun part, but it is kind of the most important foundational thing that you can do to make sure that you're protecting yourself. And that's why we want to make sure to really hammer home, have a contract and understand how that works.
Yeah.
But did you, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you started out, writing your own contract, kind of how did that process work for you? Did you find a lawyer? Did you go online? How did that work?
Well, luckily, when I started off, there was a website that's now defunct, called ArtPact, where they actually have PDFs that you could use, download. It was just free to artists. Unfortunately, that website folded, but if you ask around, the contract template is pretty easy to find. You can find it on Facebook groups pretty easily. But it was a very easy boilerplate contract. And I think a lot of people get intimidated, but really it's just making sure all the bases are covered, and it's fairly easy to, once you get the hang of the language of a contract, to just make sure all the information is in there. I mean, primarily you just want to make sure people understand what rights are being used, like the publication rights, any other Can they use it just in, say, a game module, or can they use it in a game module plus, promotion nationally, promotion internationally? Because those are all things that you have to negotiate when you're talking about rights. How long they can use it for, how many publications they can use it for. Other things that, like you mentioned, the promotion ahead of time. Sometimes with smaller Kickstarters, I'll actually say, you want this as you want an NDA, but what if I start painting this on Twitch so that and I just keep promoting the project we're working on, because that actually can help build their an interest. Because not only are they hiring you, that's another thing that people are hiring you for, is if you have a fan base already, they are not only marketing to the gamers, but they are marketing to your fan base, because it's somebody that I'm already interested in, they're producing a deck of cards or something, and it's I'm just going to want this game for that deck of cards. I mean, that happens with Magic all the time. And I think that's primarily it with contracts.
Yeah.
So I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about workflow.
Yep.
I see a lot of wisdom floating around the internet these days of being willing to kill yourself for your art, basically, and just burn yourself out. And I just wanted to really stress the importance of taking breaks. I last year injured myself as a result of art because I was pushing myself way too hard. So I sprained my finger, essentially, which seems very trivial, but it is a potentially debilitating injury.
You had a splint on it and everything.
Yeah, I had a splint
trying to draw with a
for
splint.
a week.
I'm sure you can all understand how difficult that would be.
I was trying to do it, and my doctor was like, "Don't, just seriously take a week off. Let your finger heal. Don't do that." And this is sort of like a history of behavior for me since I started the company, and I started out by doing essentially 300 pieces in 3 months and working 20-hour days to do that, and don't do that. Limit yourself, have work hours. I cannot stress the importance of that enough.
Yeah.
Your deadlines can get moved if you talk to your art directors. They will understand, and they will probably be willing to move your deadlines as long as it's not something crucial. As long as you're not being unreasonable and taking months and months for something that shouldn't take months and months. But especially if it's your health at stake.
Yeah, that is definitely something that I try to impress upon the artists when we're working, and I say, just communicate with me. Tell me that you're having an issue. I'm working with an artist right now who actually has a vision issue, and if he works too many hours, he actually can't put out good art because he has trouble seeing after a certain point. And so we were working through the deadlines, and he's like, I know you need this thing, but I have to take a break. I can't do this anymore. And so we'll work with you. And I think that is really important for artists when you're starting out, because you're so hungry for work and you want to do everything that you can. You got to make money and whatnot. Understanding your limitations and knowing roughly how long does it take you to put out a piece this size versus how much detail and what medium. Knowing those different things about yourself will help you in the end, because you can better negotiate timelines so that you're setting the correct expectation for the people you're working with, but then you're also not pushing yourself so hard that you can't meet those deadlines that you've just established. So yeah, that's very important to know.
I think just going back to the initial thing, it's when you first start off, a lot of people will say, take every job that you're going to get, because it's exposure, it's money, you're just trying to build your brand. Well, that might have been true. I heard that a lot in art school. That might have been true, 10, 15 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, but because of how quickly online, social media, social promotion has blown up, the new caveat I would say is take every job within reason of how much it's going to help you promote yourself. because really, again, there's so many other ways to make money and to build your audience now that taking a lot of these really bad, small press jobs where you're spending 40 hours trying to produce something for a game company that's only going to pay you $25 for that end product, and you can't print it or anything, use the image ever again. Like there's kind of an imbalance of how much it would actually help you. So it's definitely an issue, and it's a great way to burn out.
Yeah.
I did that for about 3 years, and I ended up having to quit art altogether for a year, just because I just couldn't produce anything anymore for myself or really anything of quality, because I had stacked up so many awful low-end commissions just trying to hit rent. At my peak, I was producing about 7 large paintings in a week, which just to pay rent, because some of the rates were just way too low, and that's just not a good way to not only physically keep producing art, but also just mentally being able to come up with new concepts and stuff every time.
And then to elaborate on that a little bit, don't take so many jobs that you can't still do art for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That there's nothing more spirit crushing than not being able to enjoy art and being forced to do it for other people all the time. So I made one of the implementations that I've done in this last year is I have my Sunday morning Twitch stream that I just do art for me, and it's not for anyone else. It's whatever I feel like doing that day. I don't do commissions during that time. I don't do work stuff. It's just for me, and it's just to enjoy myself. And I started carrying a sketchbook again, and if I'm having a rough day, I leave and I go and sit at Starbucks for 4 hours and sketch. And really making sure to take the time to enjoy the process of it is so important to keeping your work fresh.
So how many people out here are currently artists, or you're working on getting in the field? Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
So still students in school, or ready to get started and get out there? Okay. So I think the next thing that we should probably touch on, the importance of portfolios, how to build a good portfolio, what websites are good for getting exposure, because you were just touching on how with the advent of the internet, it's so much, you don't have to do as much of the foot pedaling and trying to get around to see people face to face. So in your experience, where have you found the best sources of promoting your art online and getting yourself out there?
Most of the key websites, Facebook is still the top platform, even though the algorithms kind of messed up everything. Instagram is still the second best. A lot of people still, DeviantArt, I know a lot of people kind of are like, oh, that's not a good place to get hired by, but it's an easy place to get exposure. Especially, I'll be in Artist Alley, and oh, hey, I saw that when it was a daily deviation. Why don't I pick up a copy? It's just for most. I've heard that most art directors, they need to see your work about 7 times before they're ready to pull the trigger on hiring you. So, if they're on DeviantArt and social media and everything else, that's an easy way for them to just see it without you, trying to take an action to approach somebody.
I will say when I'm looking for artists, DeviantArt's really hard to search.
Yes.
One of the good resources that I use a lot is ArtStation. That's where I find most of the people, and I don't know, maybe I'm an exception in this, but when I'm looking for artists, I know right away. I go yep, no, that's the one. And I just send her links all day long, going hey, send this person work.
Behance is also, so I go between DeviantArt, ArtStation, and Behance, which is the Adobe portfolio. When you get the Creative Suite now, it's included with that. And I use all three of those to find artists. DeviantArt, like you said, I know a lot of people kind of go, DeviantArt, who. But
there's a lot of great
there
stuff
are great artists on there. They just did a big promotion at Comic-Con. Like, they are still definitely an area where you should be putting up your art for sure.
And make sure, so DeviantArt has this flaw that it's really hard to contact you through DeviantArt.
Yes.
So make sure you have your contact information on your page.
On your art.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of times what I'll do is, underneath my signature, usually you can just put it cleanly in the corner, just put your website or someplace.
So useful.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I would
Because
kill for that on every art.
it's just an easy way. What you want to basically set up with all of your different social networks is some kind of, I've heard artists call it an ecosystem, where everything leads back to your store and your portfolio page.
Exactly, because if I find an artist that I think is going to work for a project, I will try to track them down on as many social media things as I can, because I know nowadays there's so many artists that I'm posting some of this stuff to Instagram, some of it's on my Twitter feed, and some of it's my portfolio. Taking all of that back to a contact me page, because if I see your art and I love it and I don't know how to get a hold of you, you're not gonna get a job.
Yeah.
So I think that is a really key thing. It's good to spread yourself out, but remember that it all needs to point somewhere where it's easy for me to email you.
Yeah. I mean, the key is 3 active social media sites where you're primarily known. Tumblr is another great one. And then have a couple of other ones that are passive. Like the ones that are active, you want to post every day, every other day, every week. The more passive ones, it's like, okay, I haven't uploaded to here for a while, like maybe every couple months.
Well, there's a really great site also called ifttt.com.
I haven't heard that.
If this, then that. And it lets you set up applets that will make it so whenever you tweet, it sends that tweet and takes the image and posts it to Tumblr or so you can automate all of that stuff and save yourself a ton of time.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And when crafting a portfolio, there are 2 schools of mind. There are some people that what works best for them is that this is my art style, this is my medium, this is my entire portfolio. And if that's the case, then pick the strongest pieces you have of that, and having a limited portfolio is going to be great for you, because you can be like, no, these are my strongest pieces and this is exactly what I do. And then, and an art director will look at that and know they'll be perfect for these things. There are other people who say, no, I know I can do multiple styles. And if that's the case, that's also very good, but make sure you organize it in such a way that you're showing, I'm not a scatterbrain, I'm just showing you that I can do different things. But again, limit your portfolio, because as an art director, if I'm looking for someone for a project, I don't have 2 hours to scour. Well, they do 5 different styles and they've got 20 pieces of each. You're going to have to really tailor those down to say, these are my strongest, and then don't be afraid once I've emailed you to say, well, what's your project? I can send you more tailored things after that. And I think that's a pitfall that a lot of people fall into. They feel like, I got to show them everything up front. And you don't. You just have to hook us.
Well, and set up separate portfolio pages for different art directors. Like if you have several different styles, say you're going after Wizards or Fantasy Flight or something, have a targeted portfolio that you can just set up a separate hidden website, especially on Squarespace. You can set up ones where it's you just send them directly to that one and only have 6 to 12 pieces max that is related to their brands, the stuff that they're producing. And if you have a different style that it's okay, I want to go into patterning and licensing. This is the portfolio I'm going to bring to one of those conventions, and just have the websites geared to them.
Yeah, I'd say with logos and patterning, it's a little bit of a different animal. But in terms of illustration, what I'm looking for also is the lowest number of pieces that show the deepest breadth possible. So there's so many portfolios that I go, okay, this person can draw portraits all day long. I don't have any idea if they can do backgrounds or vehicles or machinery or anything like that. I want to see as much in one piece without having to click through as I possibly can. I mean, that's that's basically it on that.
Yeah. Another question that I know we get asked a lot sometimes is, how do you feel about artists approaching you or artists sending you things, things like that? Personally, I see no problem with that. I think that's a great thing to do. Go out there and promote yourself. It's your brand, your job, and that's what you should be doing. Don't be afraid if you find a website and they have a contact us page. Don't be afraid to say like, hey, I'm an artist in the industry. Here's some pieces. I'd love to get to talk to someone, or conventions like this. Going booth to booth and be like, hey, is your art director around? No? Okay, well, here's a business card, which is the other thing we need to talk about. Here's a takeaway that I can give you. Would you mind giving that to them? And they'll try to get back in contact with you. Don't be afraid to do that. It's just as important now as it was 10 years ago before the internet.
Yeah. And if I am approached by people and have time, I try to always do portfolio reviews and talk with people about that. It gets a little hectic, but
leave behinds are really important, just because like not only because you meet a million people in a Comic-Con or something, if you have a leave behind that you can leave with them, they'll be digging through their convention stuff when they get back to the hotel or back at the office, and it's like, ooh, I forgot about this guy. Let me put it on my desk. And,
I can count the times I've cleaned my office out like months later, and I'm like, oh yeah. I have this really cool one.
Putting your art on your leave behind. I know it sounds of course you would, but like do that. If it's a business card, two-sided business card. One side's your contact info, and one side is your best piece of art. Because having your business card and your name is great, but like Adam said, it could be a month after the convention before I've had a chance to go through all of that. For some reason, it was just totally chaotic.
Yeah.
And I flip it over and I'm like, oh, this is so good. I could totally use it for this, 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 this. Awesome. Okay. Now I remember who this person is.
Right.
But if it's just a name on a page, then it doesn't hit home as well as it could.
Same instance when I'm cleaning my office out, I go, oh yeah, this is a great one, because I see this art and remember it. Literally every single card that doesn't have art just goes straight in the trash. I'm not going to spend time later looking people up that don't have what they're selling me, essentially, on there.
Which, to that point, follow up. This is a big thing that I cannot enforce enough with people. Follow up. If you meet with an art director, if you meet with someone about a job, follow up with them. Say like, hey, it's Gen Con. Don't do it the next day, because chances are we probably don't even have the internet connection to see your email. But a week later, send that follow-up email. Hey, we met at Gen Con. I'm so-and-so. We talked about these pieces. Here's a couple more examples. I just wanted to send them your way and see if you had any other questions. It doesn't have to be long, but it's just enough to get that conversation going again. Because if you don't follow up, there's a chance, there's a very real chance that somehow your card got lost somewhere, or I work on 4 projects at a time, and I'm trying to remember the artists of all of these projects at the same time and where they need to go and what's going on. If you start that conversation, it's a lot easier for me to just be like, oh, reply.
I had when I first started, I had a notebook of that I would just jot down, name of the art director, company, what we talked about, and then the Monday after the convention ended, that's all I did that day was just draft. And you want to make sure they're personalized, because that's probably one of the worst things I've heard from art directors. It's just the blanket statement. Hey, it was great talking to you at Gen Con.
Getting a form letter.
Yeah, basically, it's like, hey, thank you for touching on that color theory. I'm definitely going to be working on it, and I'll be sending you those results in a couple of weeks. So, because not only does it show that you had a personal connection with that art director that it shows that you want to collaborate with them, but it also shows that I heard your feedback. And it is going to be directing toward, you are already directing where I'm going to take this next piece. So it shows that you can follow through.
Yeah, absolutely. Any questions at this point? Yeah.
Actually, this is maybe kind of a weirdish question. It's related to a little bit like the accidentally posting spoilers sort of mentioned Twitch,
Mhm.
and so I have a lot of friends who use it, and like one of the good things is that it's very good at connecting you with people. But one of the things that I've been trying to figure out is with social media in general, like you want to be open enough you can be contacted, but like you don't want to be so open enough that like random weird person from the internet can contact you.
Yeah.
The question, in case you couldn't hear, the question was in regards to using social media and how to kind of keep the line between I'm open enough to be contacted, but I'm not so open that anybody on the internet can get me.
I haven't had too much of an issue with this, but I definitely know some artists that have. I mean, one, just having a business email, first off, that's just an easier way to do it. And I tend to just limit my connections to the direct market to here's the email contact form, and that's how you can contact me. And every once in a while you'll get somebody that's a little weird or something, and it's like you can figure out if like you just want to ignore them, or just like try to do a team response or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say make sure you don't have any of your personal information. Like have a business contact.
Yeah.
The important thing to remember is that you are the artist, but your art is your business. And those are two separate things. So don't necessarily post like your personal email on there. Have your separate entity of, I am an artist, this is my business, this is my LLC, this is the email that you use to contact me. And that will help keep that dividing line between personal and business.
And I think generally it being a business thing, it being a business contact kind of deters people from treating it as a personal one. It's not 100%, but I think that having it be like very official seeming and being very not personal in it. Like you can be personal on a Twitch stream and talk with people and chat like that. I mean, they have a block function on there, so
you can be
people start getting weird.
But you don't have to be personal.
Right.
Yeah. If you are interested in doing something with a Twitch stream, I would actually talk to Nen Chang in Artist Alley, because she has one of the best Twitch streams that I'm aware of, and she actually hires moderators. She hires some of her friends to just watch her 2-hour, 3-hour stream, and they basically take care of trolls in the comments section. So that's another option. So
does that help?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah.
This is more startup related,
Yep.
but would college experience and like the degrees you get, would that be useful, or would a portfolio be more what an art director is looking at?
A portfolio is definitely going to be the most useful, because when I'm looking at a project, I need to see your art. I need to see confirmation that you can actually do these things you're saying you can do, that your forms are correct, that you can do watercolor or oil, depending what the project calls for, those kinds of things. So definitely a portfolio is the way to go. However, starting out in school, it's okay if you need to put a couple pieces that were projects in there, or school projects or things, while you're building up your own personal backflow of projects.
I'll say that like if I'm looking at your work, I don't care what degree you have.
Mm-hmm.
I care about the quality of your work. So you can be a 12-year-old that does just like amazing stuff, still in middle school, or you can be like an incredibly well-trained 30-year-old that's gone to a bunch of schools, and if the 12-year-old's portfolio is better, that's who I'm going to want. But I think that what art school is valuable for is learning to work on deadlines and making contacts primarily, and also just like volume of work is so important. There's an artist, Mark Brooks, that did a quote that I love, that he said, you'll do 10,000 bad drawings in your life, you might as well get them out now. And art school is really good for getting bad drawings done.
Yes.
Turns out.
Yeah.
I know a degree does affect studio. If you actually work at a studio,
Yes.
It's more important. But for freelance, portfolios are the primary hiring mechanism.
Yeah, so if you're, for like a resume, if you're trying to get into a studio job or whatever, having those degrees are definitely going to get you there. But again, that portfolio is still going to boost you along the way.
Yeah. And I mean, college itself is a great networking tool as well. I love telling this story. My first portfolio review with Fantasy Flight was actually set up as a prank. One of my college friends, met me here, and she's like, "Hey, did you bring a portfolio? Great, because you got a portfolio review in like 30 seconds. So go talk to Zoe right now." And that's exactly how I got hired. So you meet people that a lot of times they have other networks and stuff that when you become friends, they might be willing to share with you.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, there's a reason you see Jason Segel and Seth Rogen in all the same movies.
Yeah, exactly.
And that kind of brings up a good point too. As important as it is to network with art directors and the people that are going to maybe give you the jobs, it is just as important to network with other artists. Because when you have those questions, like, okay, I'm trying to figure out pricing, project pricing. Does this seem fair? Is this competitive? What kinds of things, or I don't understand this contract. What kinds of things did you get asked in your contract? Does this seem fair? Should I, those are all great ways. And then artists are all really nice. Well, generally speaking, they're all really nice people.
Overall.
And so they'll be like, hey, I heard about this project, and I feel like your art, you just did this to me this morning.
Yeah.
There's this project going, and I really feel like this artist would be great. You should really go talk to them. And they will help promote you and get you started and get you going. So networking with other artists, just as important.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times some artist or some art director has approached me and they're like, "Hey, we want you to do 40 paintings in like a couple months." And I'm like, "I can do a couple, but here are 5 or 6 other artists that have a very similar style and feel to my art.
Yeah.
Can we hire my friends?"
Right.
Spread the.
I mean, that's how we found out about you, is through other people.
Right.
So.
Right. And I love this portion of the illustration field because I feel like it's competitive, but it's not cutthroat.
Right.
And really, everyone is trying to make art better as a whole, and we're all trying to work together to make that happen.
Yeah. Another thing on that kind of is that art is a very isolating discipline at times, and to find people to work on it with is really important. One of the things that I used to do is go to some cities. Kansas City had one. There's a drink and draw event that they would basically rent out the top room of a bar, and they would just have a stack of Bristol board and a bunch of art supplies, and everybody just goes and hangs out and draws, and you will draw a thing and hand it to another artist, and they'll draw a thing. And events like that, and if you can't find one, start one, because artists are kind of hungry for that also.
Any other questions? Yeah.
How important is for you to see processing the portfolio, meaning sketches, technical details?
So the question was, how important is it to see the process see sketches on through? For me, I have a pretty standard expectation that I lay out with the artist, which is I'm going to give you the art brief, and then I want to see sketches. And until those sketches have hit exactly what that art brief needs to be, because, like I said, I was an art student, I understand that once you get to a certain point, turning back is very difficult. So we will usually do sketches, and then we'll start laying in color blocking to make sure that we're establishing all the correct colors for that, because if it's something in the Sentinels world, they have very specific colors on an outfit, different things like that. I guess I should say sketches, and then line art, and then color blocking, and then the final project, the final piece. That's kind of the process that I like to go through, because in the beginning we want to establish everything so that you have a clear understanding of what we're expecting, and so that I know that you're not going to get so far down that we can't make those changes that we need, and then the art is no longer useful.
In a portfolio, I would say I only want to see finished pieces, unless it is specifically for a concept artist position. If you're making a concept artist portfolio, you want iteration. Is specifically what you want. Is you want to see, okay, here's the Halo guy's armor, and here's 20 different takes on that.
Yeah.
So for a concept artist position, that's what you want. But for if you're trying to do illustration, if you're trying to do card art, if you're trying to do game art, you want just finished pieces.
Yeah.
I was wondering, as like an art director, do you look separately for the drawing aspect and the graphic design aspect, or do you think there's a portfolio that would sort of show off graphical design that you're looking for?
We look separately.
So
for
we look separately partially because we have on staff graphic artists, but I do know that there are some artists out there that can do both, and it kind of falls back to the same as if you're comfortable in multiple mediums, have a design layout portfolio and then have an art portfolio. And then when you're meeting with an art director or communicating with them, express to them like, I can do both of these very confidently. Which one are you looking for? Cool, let's focus on that one.
I think the only exception that I can think of would be if you have an art style that incorporates design elements into it. Like a lot of modern comic book artists will use very abstract designs in their illustrations. And so if you have a sort of fusion style like that, then that's useful to see, but that's very, very specific.
It is helpful to know that you understand graphic design, because then I can talk to you about the layout and like maybe iconography or different things like that, and you'll understand if I say like, well, we're gonna lay out a title here and we're gonna put icons here and we're gonna put this here and whatnot, and talk about the page layout, and you understand like, oh yeah, okay, I know how that would work with this art and whatever. That's definitely a way to enhance your art, knowing both sides of those.
Yeah, learning about graphic design is very valuable, not just from a communication standpoint, but also from a composition standpoint.
Right.
And knowing that you are going to have design elements on top of things a lot of the time, and making sure that your art's not hidden. So,
yeah. But be sure to have two separate portfolios.
Yep.
Two separate portfolios.
Yes, that's an awful thing that I've heard a lot of art directors said. It's like, yeah, they have an amazing painting of a drawing, but they're, the typesetting that they chose just does not fit that. So, just make sure that they're just separated.
Yeah, I mean, even within the comic world, if you are a penciler, we don't really deal with this level of granularity, but this is a kind of an example. But if you're a penciler, you want your portfolio to be only pencils and you don't want inks on it. If you're an inker, you want to be inking other people's work. If you're a colorist, you want to be coloring other people's work, so that you are showing, I do these colors, or I do these inks. These other aspects, I've seen so many portfolios ruined by bad inks or bad pencils because the person is that's not their discipline. Yeah. Yes.
Would you say that artists are moving more towards the digital media, like Photoshop or Corel, etc., versus traditional mediums, or is there still kind of
there's still a lot of both.
Preference for either?
Yeah.
So the question was, are artists moving more toward digital mediums, or do you see a lot of people still using the traditional mediums?
There's definitely still a lot of both that I see, and a lot of the big name comic artists especially still do traditional pencils, traditional inks, and then scan it. That's the biggest barrier, I would say, to traditional work is that you have to have a good scanner.
There's a ton of traditional artists, especially in gaming.
Yeah.
Like, you can go through Artist Alley, and it seems like the amount of oil paintings has just increased exponentially every year. And really, it's like you can totally survive on traditional art if it looks awesome. It's just but the only caveat to that I would say is make sure you understand how to correct things in Photoshop.
Yes, that's what I was
because there's a lot of times that you'll do a wizard with a red cape or something, and they're like, actually, that's for a blue themed deck or something like that. And so it's just easier to switch the hues in the final painting on the digital copy versus having to go in and paint it over again. So.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, that's the biggest strength of digital, I'd say, is that you can edit it forever, and you can take it back to sketch if you need to. But
when you're looking for artists on the internet, are you concerned about the location? Do you need your artists?
No, we have artists. I'm working right now with an artist that lives in Japan, and an artist that lives in Italy, and an artist that lives in Ohio. So, yeah, location is definitely not a barrier at all. But if you are someone that we don't ever get to touch base with, like at Gen Con or things like that, just make sure you're really, really good at communication.
Yeah.
yeah, we had Spirit Island. There was, I think, 2 artists in Australia. And one of them was really communicative. We would get emails every day. And the other one we would not hear from for weeks at a time. And guess which one got more work?
So, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Of all the things that you kind of outlined, all the strategies for like getting your foot in the door and talking to people and getting connected, like is there one thing like that rises above the rest, like absolutely do this? Or is it like
Okay, so the question was, of all of the things that we've outlined, is there one key thing that kind of rises to the top of, like, absolutely make sure you do this?
Be nice.
Yes.
Be nice, yeah.
Follow Wheaton's law
Be
for
kind.
sure.
That's really, like, that's actually, I'm half joking, but like that's what leaves an impression on me is I go, oh yeah, this was a really cool person, like, and I made a connection here.
Yeah.
You know, I want to do work with people that I have connections with, more so than people, like, if someone is an 8 out of 10 and I have a good connection with them, I'm going to pick them over a 10 out of 10 that I don't have a good connection with. So
yeah, I mean, I think communication is really the biggest thing. If we could hammer that home, the willingness to, if you have a booth and someone's walking by and you're willing to be like, hey, how's it going? Let's chat. Those kinds of things, or following up with emails or talking about deadlines. Those are all things. Having a good portfolio or being able to present it. They're all things that really fall down into that communication thing, because you are doing this to build up your business. And so the best way to do that is to be willing to talk through those different things.
I walk through Artist Alley every year and just like look at all the stuff there, talk to some people. There was one artist a couple of years ago that I saw his work and I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. This is so cool. And I went up and talked to him and I said, hey, like, I really love your work. I'm art director of this company. I really want to, talk with you about this. And he had no enthusiasm and was really like low key. It was like, oh yeah, cool, all right, yeah, and like didn't try to engage me at all. Didn't sell his work at all. And like didn't work with him because like I got nothing back.
Not that you need to do a song and dance or anything
no,
like
but
that,
like,
but
just talk to me.
Yeah.
Just be nice.
Yeah.
Don't be standoffish. Don't. Yeah.
And I'd say, especially if you're in an artist alley or something, that goes by with everyone that you meet. Because sometimes I heard one artist tell a story about, there was a 12-year-old that came up to her booth and was just kind of looking through her stuff, and she was just nice to the guy, and he went away to catch up with his mom. 10 years later, he has become one of her biggest collectors of original artwork. Because he just remembered how much she was nice to him and treated him like a adult client, and it's just important because like a lot of people come every single year, and you know what? Sometimes they don't buy your stuff now, but they're saving up for later.
Civility goes a long way.
Yeah. So be nice. Have a portfolio. Any other questions? Yeah.
I was wondering, since you've looked through a lot of contracts, I was wondering, do you tend to outline a contract for just like over an entire project, or do you go over it again and transition a piece? Like,
yes.
Are there any red flags that would say this is a bad contract?
Sure. Okay. So the question was kind of, what are some red flags with the contract? Do you do the whole project piece by piece? Some of that depends on what you have established with the art director. So if you're working on like a piece by piece basis, So in the beginning of the negotiation process with me, I will outline, hey, we have 6 pieces that we want to have worked on, and they're going to be full color, and they're going to be this level of detail. And if you say, yep, okay, 6 pieces, this is kind of the pricing structure we have, then that's when I'm going to take and transition into the contract. But if you and I talk about 6 pieces, and then all of a sudden that contract's like, maybe 10 pieces, maybe this, maybe that, and starts getting real open-ended, then you want to sit back down and start talking again and be like, hey, no, we agreed on this, and now your contract's open to all of these things. Because your contract should also be establishing how much money you're getting for those 6 pieces. So if we say 6 pieces at X amount, and that contract now says like, as many pieces at this amount, that's not cool. Because now you're getting undercut for all that work you're doing. Yeah. So we lay out how many pieces, initial deadlines for sketches, deadlines for the finished product, and payment 50% up front, 50% upon completion. Those are the kinds of details that you want to see in that contract. And if they don't have terms as far as if this isn't completed, or if we drop off the face of the earth and we stop communicating with you, what can you do about it? Those are the kinds of things that are kind of red flags of like, all right, this is not strict enough to cover yourself as an artist.
And just to add on to that, contracts as a whole, you gotta really think about what you want from the project. You know, there's a idiom that's going around now is like, don't do anything for exposure. You'll hear that from a lot of artists now, and I'd say that's true to a point. I have definitely taken projects where it's like, oh, you know, this brand is something that like it's a high value brand. People, you know, if they can associate your name with it, you know, that's a big deal. But that company then owns all the rights to the image. You can't reprint it and stuff. Like, a lot of people will say, no, don't take that. But I've definitely taken a couple of those projects just because it was a good point for my career to get into some other doors.
Yeah, I'd say a better guideline is don't take work from anyone who offers to pay you an exposure.
Yes, like, yeah, definitely. But then there are other situations where I have sort of a tier of like, you know, I'm not going to start a project, say, unless they're willing to pay $400 at least, you know. But this person approaches me, the project sounds cool, it fits what I like to produce. You know, you can negotiate with them, well, you know, can I have partial print rights so that I can continue making a little bit of cash down the way, you know, selling prints or adding it to a sketchbook or an art book, like, of your career 20 years down the line. You know, I'd be willing to maybe move that down a little bit, you know, for that piece or those pieces. You know, again, it's part of it is just becoming literate in being able to negotiate contracts.
Any other questions? Okay, so I would say biggest takeaways that we don't be afraid to talk to other artists, ask questions, don't be afraid to talk to art directors and creative directors. We're people too. We want to make a good product, and the best way we can do that is to have a good relationship with you. So, you know, don't be afraid to ask us questions, show us portfolios, get clarification on projects. That's the one big thing that, oh, I was afraid to ask questions because I didn't want you to think that like I didn't know what I was doing. No, please, ask the questions so that we can make the right thing at the end, and then we're not like, well, we just pay for art we can't use because they wouldn't ask us questions. Have a portfolio, know your contract. Yay! So if you have any other questions, we'll kind of hang around outside the doors if you've got any questions or anything. But we're pretty much at time, so if we don't have any other questions here, then...
You can bug me at Artist Alley, booth 22. I'm sure you guys will be around the room.
So we'll be either in our room, which is 140, 141, or in our booth, which is 1343. There's a big old die that says Greater Than Games on it floating around our booth, but feel free to stop by, say hi. We'd be happy to chat with any of you. So thank you so much for taking part of your day to come hang out with us.